Good evening, everyone. From
Good evening. Yes, hi. Nice to meet you all. Yes, let's begin. And let's begin with greeting our guest, Miss Runa Badwan. Hi, how are you? Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum assalam. Hi, everyone. My name is Savannah
nice to meet
Badwan.
you.
Nice to meet you as well. And I'm so happy to be here to get to know all of you and just spend this time looking at speaking activities together.
Yes, let's welcome Ms. Runa Badwan, the project manager in English for Education System in the British Council. And we are very glad and pleased to meet you here in our association. It is called the Arab English Teachers Association. And this is the second webinar with you, Ms. Runa. Welcome and thanks very much for accepting our invitation for this webinar. Before we start, let's begin with the first advertisement about our association. Please, let's watch, which was in November. في صوت؟ there is sound?
أستاذة لا ما في صوت ما في صوت.
طيب.
أوكي.
شهادات حضور مميزة. اللقاء التأسيسي لجمعية معلمي الإنجليزية العرب. انعقاد اللقاء التأسيسي الأول لجمعية معلمي اللغة الإنجليزية العرب يوم الأحد 28/11 الساعة 6 بتوقيت القدس، وشهادات حضور مميزة. معلمون وأكاديميون بارزون عرب وأجانب من ذوي الخبرات العظيمة سيتم استضافتهم في الجمعية في لقاءات دورية سعيا منا لتطوير وتمكين المعلم العربي. نلتقي لنرتقي ولنضع اللبنة الأولى في تأسيس مشروعنا، مشروع معلمي اللغة الإنجليزية العرب، لنتناقش ونتحاور ونصل لحلول جذرية نطبقها على أرض الواقع. يبدأ لقاؤنا الأول بحضور رئيس جمعية المترجمين العرب الأستاذ عامر العظيم، والبروفيسورة سحر البطاينة نائبة رئيس جمعية المترجمين العرب، وتتلوها مداخلات الأساتذة يعرضون خلالها أفكارهم والمواضيع التي يحتاجها معلم اللغة الإنجليزية لينجح في عمله وأدائه. سيكون إعادة الخطة يقدمها رئيس جمعية معلمة اللغة الإنجليزية الأستاذة شوقية حواورة للحضور الكرام. وأخيرا نستقبل مداخلات الزوار ومن بدوره مشكورين بمتابعة من مديرة التحرير الأستاذة دانيال كولان المصرية. فأهلا وسهلا بكم في جمعية معلمي الإنجليزية. انضموا إلينا يوم الأحد الساعة 6 بتوقيت القدس 28/11 بكل عنفوان، وفي جعبتكم الكثير من الأفكار والأنشطة التي تثري اللقاء. لا تأتوا فقط مستمعين، لا نريد لقاء بلا روح ولا كأي لقاء، نريده مثمرا وأفكاره وأنشطته عملية وداعمة لتطوير مستوى المعلمين في جميع أقطار الوطن العربي لأعلى مستوى. نتناقش ونتحاور، نتبادل المعارف ونخرج بتوصيات قابلة للتنفيذ. فكونوا بالقرب. مع تحياتي، أنا شوقية حواورة، رئيسة جمعية معلمي اللغة الإنجليزية العربية.
Let's watch the advertisement for this webinar. Thank you for watching. And now let's another time greet our guest from the British Council, Mr. Runa. Please begin and start. And we are very pleased to have you in our association. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for that. So as you said, my name is Rana Badwan. I work with the British Council. I've been with the British Council it's been almost 10 years now. And for much of that time, I was a teacher. We had a teaching center here in Ramallah. And for the last 3 years or so, I've been managing the English projects. And much of that is focused on training English teachers. So today, we're going to be looking at speaking. Practicing speaking and working on speaking skills with your students is one of the things that comes up most frequently whenever I speak with teachers or with the Ministry of Education. With anybody, they always talk about the need to practice speaking more and how that's the skill that they struggle with the most. So that's kind of why we decided to focus on that. Before I share my screen, I did just want to let you all know, I'll be watching the chat, so please do use it and drop any questions or comments in there. And also feel free to raise your hand at any point to ask questions, because I put together a presentation and kind of a list of things to cover, but really this is for all of you. So anything that you want us to talk about related to the topic, your questions, issues that you face, that's really more important even than the things that I've already prepared. All right, let me just go ahead and share. Could I just check that you all can see my screen now?
Yes, it is seen.
Okay. Not sure why it's doing this. Okay. All right. Okay, so actually, sorry, that's fine. I'm just going to open this on another application on my phone as well, so I can see the chat while I'm presenting. Okay. All right. So the name of this session is Practical Ways to Practice Speaking. And I thought it was important to start it with practical because we have to just deal with whatever we've got in the classroom in terms of resources, the size of the classroom, the level, the curriculum, the course book. So we can't just take a dream lesson that's on the internet and automatically apply it. We have to be sometimes practical and adapt and make sure that it fits the context that we're working in. So that was the idea behind the practical there. All right. In this session, we're going to start by looking at some key ingredients that you need for speaking practice. We'll also look at how you can integrate speaking kind of in everything that you do in the classroom. Some key considerations when you're designing speaking activities or adapting ones that already exist to your own class. I'm going to share some of my favorite speaking activities with you, things that I used to use very regularly in my classes, both with children, with adults, with very low-level learners, and even with more advanced learners. So activities that you can adapt to different groups. And then we can look more at some of your own challenges that haven't been addressed and that you'd like to talk about, and any questions that you have. So here, I just wanted you to think off the top of your head, how can we get our students to speak up? What do they need to start speaking? What do they need from us as teachers? Could I have you just type in the chat your initial thoughts. What's your answer here to this question? How can we get our students to speak in class? What do they need? Anybody? No ideas? Okay. I need to make sure they have, I thought of, all right, there we go. We're getting some. Okay, so we've got visual aids, vocabulary, motivation. All right, what else? Okay, good. We've got another person saying vocabulary. All right, here are the three things that I thought of. One was an encouraging environment. Okay, and this is related to some of the things that have come up in the chat, such as motivation and self-esteem, and believing in themselves or confidence. So all of that can come from an encouraging environment. The teacher needs to be able to motivate people speaking because if they're not comfortable that the other students are going to make fun of them, or that the teacher is judging them or just marking them for every mistake they made, then that's not an encouraging environment. They're not going to want to speak. Next thing I have is a reason to speak. That also comes back to motivation partly. They need a reason, but they also need to feel like their speaking serves a purpose. It could be that it's because it's required. Maybe it's the rules that you've set. Maybe if they don't speak, then they can't accomplish the task. Maybe that's what they're being graded on. But if students don't have a real reason to speak, then they're probably not going to. If you just tell them, if your speaking activity is a discussion, and you just tell them, here, talk about this with your partner, it's not really a reason for them to speak, at least not to speak in English. They could easily just agree together in their native language, in Arabic, and then just, that'd be the end of it. You need to give them a reason. And this idea of needing a reason to speak is why a lot of people, if they go to a country where English is the main language spoken, all of a sudden they'll be put in situations where they have to speak. And it, like magic, they can manage. They find a way to speak and get their message across. The third thing I've got there is the language they need. So this is something that many of you have said, needing vocabulary, and that's exactly what it's about. They need to figure out what's the language that they need. Do they already have it? Is it something they've already learned that you've already taught them? Or is it something that you need to provide? All right. Is there anything else that isn't covered by those that you think is required? Taking a look at your comments. We've got some extra. Okay, let's move on. Now this next slide here is about integrating speaking. So speaking in the classroom doesn't have to be a specific speaking activity. Okay, we all have many things that we have to cover in the curriculum. I don't think anybody in their school has a class that's purely about speaking English. I think you're required to teach grammar, vocabulary, and all 4 skills. So you can't have every activity purely about speaking. So you have to think about ways to integrate speaking throughout the lesson. And you can integrate it through the classroom routine. That's one thing. Okay, so if think about how you start your lesson. Do you start it by asking them about, do you have any questions that you start your lesson with? Do you start with a review of the rules? Do you start with talking about the date, the weather, Do you have anything like that? Do you start with a quick warmer each lesson? Could you use those as opportunities to get them to practice their speaking? What about when they want to ask or answer questions? Do you require that they ask them in English? I know it can be difficult to get them to do it, but if they don't ask their question in English, then maybe you just don't answer it. Maybe that's a way to kind of encourage them. If they have a question, right, then that's their reason, okay? If you're only going to answer it if they ask it in English, that gives them a reason. And that could be a question about anything. It doesn't have to be specifically about speaking. And encouraging them to answer each other's questions in English as well, because inevitably in class, they're going to be asking questions. You'll ask them questions, they'll ask each other. So this is just another way to integrate it. Getting them when they check answers with each other or with you, that's another opportunity to get them to use English. And these are practical things. The language that they'll use for that is very practical, something they can use anytime. Do you have any anybody? Okay. I'll share one idea that I heard recently. And this is something.
The sound is not so clear. Please adjust.
Okay. Can you hear me now?
Yes, thank you. Go ahead.
Okay. Okay, just let me know if it happens again.
Okay.
I'll share with you one idea that I heard recently. At one school, they decided to have they would choose one day a week, where that day a week during recess, the students were asked to only use English. Okay. So this isn't something that they were doing in the lesson, but kind of as a school, they decided to have, use English, encourage students to speak English during recess. And the teachers would try to speak with them in English during recess, and not just the English teachers, but it was just a way to try and encourage them to use English kind of outside of that formal setting. You could think about doing something like that with your students. One thing that you can do is a way to get them to speak English could be to give them a designated time to use their native language, or I think for maybe not all of you, but for many of you, it would be Arabic. So if you give them time and say, okay, during this part of the class, it's fine, speak Arabic, speak whatever language you want, but then during this part of the lesson, we're only going to use English. That can make them feel a little bit more open to using it, because they won't feel so restricted, and they'll understand that there is a time later on or before when they could use Arabic or another language. Okay. For this next part, I just want to look quickly at some things to consider when designing speaking activities. Okay. I used to always tell teachers, and I still say this, start with your aim and then think backwards. So rather than planning your lesson from the beginning to the end, start with the very end. Okay. Because you have an aim in your mind, you have something you want them to accomplish. So start with that. Okay. So if you listen,
please, another time there is a
you start with
problem in
that,
your
and then
voice. The sound is not so clear, please, Miss Runa. Sorry for interruption.
okay. No, it must be. Maybe it's my connection. Let me see. I'll connect my hotspot.
The internet is so weak nowadays.
Okay. Can you hear me now?
Now it is clear. Go ahead, please.
Okay. All right, connect to my hotspot. Hopefully this will help. I was talking about speaking about starting with your aim and then thinking backwards. So thinking, what do you want them to achieve by the end of the lesson? And starting with that is kind of your final thing. And then thinking about the steps that you need to do to help them be able to achieve that by the end. And it's a basic thing, really, but it can really help you to break down what they need to be able to achieve that. And that can help make sure that you consider all of these other things that I've got listed here, such as their level. Okay. Now, student level, it affects things in more than one way. So one, it limits or it can give you an indication of what they'll be able to produce. Okay, so when we say if the aim is for the learners to be able to introduce themselves, if their language is kind of an intermediate level, that means one thing. But if it's a beginner level, then they can still introduce themselves, but the introductions are going to sound different, right? So thinking about that. So bear with me with the sound. Hopefully we'll be okay with it. The other thing to consider with student level, of course, is the level of support that they need from you. Do they need you to give a full model? Do they need you to give them sentence stems to use? Do they need a dialogue that's already written to work from? What level of support do they need to be able to do the activity, speaking activity? The next thing to consider is how does it fit with everything? And what I mean by that is how does it fit with what you've already done in the lesson or in previous lessons? And how does it fit with the things that you're planning to do after that? You might have sometimes you might do something that's random and it is kind of outside of the curriculum or that doesn't exactly fit with it, but you need to have a reason for doing that. Everything should fit together really well and kind of and support each other. And it's important to point out those things to your learners too. What they're doing during this speaking activity, the reason for it, how it fits with what they've already learned, or how it will help them with what's to come. And the third thing is to think about resources. So by resources, I'm thinking time. Okay, how much time do you actually have for this? Time in terms of the actual lesson. Is there enough time for that type of speaking activity or not? Do you have time to give that activity a lesson? Or do you have other things in the curriculum that you really have to get to? You also have to think about the space that you're in. So speaking activities, some of them are done kind of at a person's seat. Students don't need to move around, but others do need them to move around. So what kind of space are you working with, and is it practical? It needs to be practical for your context. And then of course, materials. Do you need visual aids? Do you want to have a video or recording to model or as a demonstration? Do you need to give them any handouts? Do they need anything else to make the activity work for them? And then of course, what's the purpose? And by this, I mean a few different things. So one, why are you doing the speaking activity? What's the point of it? Is it just to give them just some fun practice? Are you practicing fluency? Do you want to focus on a specific grammatical point? Or is the focus on accuracy? Are you assessing them? Are you just trying to build their motivation or their confidence? Why are you doing the speaking activity? And it's important for the students to understand that. Okay, so if your purpose is just to help build their confidence, and you want to let them know that you're not going to be giving them a grade, right? You wouldn't want to put that pressure on them if the purpose is confidence. You want to let them know what you're listening for, or if they're going to be giving each other feedback, right? Make sure that the students understand the purpose and that it's communicated with them clearly. All right. Here are some types of activities. I'm sure you're familiar with these. I'll just speak to you a little bit about them. With discussions are probably the most common type that you see in course books. There will be, you might have a short reading activity or a picture and then a few questions that accompany it. And it will just say discuss in pairs and have a list of questions, or discuss in a group, those kinds of questions. But discussions can be a lot more than that. Have you ever heard of corner discussions? Has anyone ever heard of those? Of a corner discussion? Don't. Give me a yes or no in the chat. No? Okay. So a corner discussion is going to be where you assign a topic or a question, or maybe an answer to each corner of the classroom. So this is an activity where you would need to have some space for people to move around. If, for example, your discussion was about travel, and you were talking about which country, what country would you like to travel to and why? Okay, if that was the discussion question.
Sorry for interruption, Ms. Runa. Is it suitable, for example, for our crowded classes? As you know, here in Palestine, we have, for example, some classes have 40 or 35 students. How can we use this corner discussion, for example?
Well, exactly. I think if you do have one of those classrooms where it's quite crowded, you wouldn't be able to do this. And that's why I said you have to consider the space. I will just explain it to you, though, very quickly, because if you can't do it in your current classroom, maybe there will be a time when you can. Maybe there's a space outdoors where you can go to do these kinds of discussions.
Yes.
Right? So this would be where you just assign a topic. So if in the example of the travel, you would say, okay, this corner is France, this corner is Australia, this corner is China, that corner is Brazil. Okay. And you would tell them to each go to the corner, and in their corner, they discuss why they chose that country, for example. So it's just a way to get them to discuss in groups and just a way to let them move around, because a lot of times just the movement gets them excited and energized. Now, in a crowded classroom, you still might be able to do a ladder discussion. A ladder discussion is where you have people standing up in a line, so 2 by 2, okay? And they're facing each other. So you have each 2 people facing each other, and they're spread out, and it's like a ladder, the rungs of a ladder, okay? And you as the teacher would pose a question or a topic, and you would give them about 30 seconds to speak or discuss with the person standing across from them. Okay, so if you have a classroom like the one that you just described, where say you have 6 rows, and in each row you've got 6 or 7 people. Okay, you just have them stand up at their desks and turn and face each other. All right, you would ask your question, and then what happens is you choose one of the lines to be the line that moves. All right. And so say the person in the front moves to the very back and everyone in that line shifts forward. And so then the next 30 seconds, they have a new person that they're discussing with. And in this way, you can get them, if you want, to keep practicing the exact same speaking, the exact same topic again and again, but each time with a different person, because each time they're shifting, one of the two lines shifts and the other one stays in its place. And they also just have a lot of fun and everybody is getting to speak, and every 30 seconds or every minute it's with a different person. You can either, to kind of practice more on accuracy, you would keep using the exact same question. So if, for example, you want them to share, what did you do last weekend? Okay, so then they speak with this person and they tell them what they did last weekend, and then they move to the next partner and they do it all over again. And each time they'll edit themselves a little bit, and they might pick up on a different phrase from their previous partner that they use the next time they do it. Or you can pose a different question each time. And they tend to enjoy that because, again, they get to move a little bit, but this could still be used even if the classroom is small, or it's kind of crowded. It's a little bit tricky with the person in the back who has to move to the front, or sorry, with the person in the front who has to move to the back, but you can manage it. Another activity you could use are mingles. Mingles do require a little bit of space. I think they have to be able to move. But I think it's still something you can do even if the classroom is somewhat crowded. I think it's worth doing sometimes, not all the time, if you've got a crowded class. Just because the change can be good for students and can encourage them. A mingle, as you probably know, is just where you get students to mix with each other, maybe use music, and when the music stops, they speak with the person who's closest to them. Maybe you have a timer, and each time the timer goes off, they have to move to the next person. The idea, again, is to get them speaking with different people for short periods of time. These kinds of activities where they do that, speak with lots of people for short periods, they're good at building confidence, and also for practicing kind of simple chunks of language, or just for sharing, and again, building that confidence. It's not something where you'd be asking them to talk in a lot of detail about something, but it can be things like that. Another thing you can do for those kinds of short exchanges, either through a ladder discussion or mingles, you can use those to practice things like introducing yourself. You can use it to practice numbers. So for example, before you start, you can have each student write down a fake name and a fake phone number, a fake nationality, a fake job, okay? So they have kind of this new identity. And then through the mingle and the ladder, they can practice asking those questions, like, what's your name? My name is. What's your phone number? Practice saying the numbers. So it's practicing those very simple things that you might need when introducing yourself or meeting somebody for the first time. But they would have fun making up a new name, making up a nationality. And then, of course, the practice of actually saying the information. But when you do something like that, I would say it's important to give them a reason not only to speak, but to listen. So maybe have them make a list of all the people that they meet. So if, for example, they speak with 5 classmates, then they have a paper where they've written the names of the 5 classmates that they've spoken to. And again, using fake information can make it more fun. They could, give themselves the fake names, or they could make themselves celebrities, use the names of their favorite singer or favorite actor or something. But they can have a lot of fun with that. And again, those are things you can do with students at a very, very low level or a more advanced level. You just change the type of information that you want them to exchange. The next thing I have on here are debates. Debates, we usually think of doing them with students that are maybe at a more advanced level, and not so much with students who have lower levels of English. But I think with the right level of support, you can use them for different levels. You just have to think about what type of support they need, making sure that you give them enough preparation time, maybe the way that you group them. So having, making sure that they're working in teams, you have some stronger students on each team, and making sure that they've got plenty of time to prepare and that you've given them the language support that they need. But if you can set it up right with your students, then debates can be some of the most motivating activities because everyone wants to be right and they want to win. So they can really enjoy that. A very common, and I think in some ways popular activity type are presentations. People come to expect that they have to do presentations to practice language, but I would say that with presentations you have to think very carefully about them. For a few different reasons. One, sometimes it's not about the language, but people just get really nervous giving a presentation. That act of standing up in front of a group can make them nervous, and you have to think if that's the best thing to ask all of your students to do. They're also very time consuming. Okay, the worst thing you can do is ask students to prepare for a presentation and then not give them the chance to do it because you've ran out of time. So you have to think carefully. Do you actually have time to let everybody give one? Okay. And if you do, then that's great. Or maybe you just need to think about setting an appropriate time limit. Okay. And then of course there's the topic. What topic are you asking them to present on? Now, what I used to do, because some students really like the practice of giving presentations, is at the start of the semester, I would just say, okay, everybody will be required to give one presentation. If you want to give more than one and there's time, then we can do that. And basically, it would be a 2 to 3 minute presentation, so very short, and it could be on any topic they wanted, and it's what we would start the class with. So for the first 5-6 minutes of each class, we would have 2 or 3 people present. And we would just decide at the end of the lesson who's going to present the next day. And that's how it would work. And I would have a very, very simple checklist of things. And it would be like 4 criteria for each one. I would give a mark, I think 1 to 5 or something like that. And it wasn't something where it was actually a grade. It was just to give them feedback so that they could kind of just get an idea of how well they did. And that really was because it's something that they wanted to do. Okay. So that was my reason for doing them. But you might have a different reason, and you might want to give real marks. You might want to pay attention to specific things or set the topics yourself. But again, with presentations, the biggest issue I think is just time. It takes a lot of time to give everybody a chance. As the next 2 are related, role plays and simulations. Role plays, I'm sure you know, they are simulations, are basically the same thing, but the scenario is fake but you're acting as yourself. Those can be a lot of fun. Role plays, I think, when you're getting to act like somebody else. We mentioned Hands Up Project at the very beginning. I think it was Nasta who's active in Hands Up Project. Acting in drama can encourage students to speak more, to kind of to just feel more comfortable experimenting with it. And that can be just very helpful, and it can encourage them. So those can be useful. And role plays, you might not think of it as really acting in drama, but it is. It's just another kind of a simplified form, I guess. Okay. Here are some of my favorites. I've already spoken a little bit about mingles. I loved doing the kind of introductions one and getting them to choose to kind of create a new identity and then introduce themselves to the class and kind of just move around and speak with different people. You could have one about related to jobs or searching for a new best friend, for example, where before they start, this one would be kind of a more challenging one. They think, okay, what do I want in a best friend? I want somebody who likes the same music I listen to, who reads the same books, who likes to go to the same places. They can kind of make a list of things, and then they have to ask the questions when they meet somebody to find out, would this person make a good best friend for me or not? You see how that one, bit more open, there's more room for creativity. They can think about the questions and the things that they want to ask about, whereas for introductions, it's more controlled, and you're giving them the list of things that they need to ask about. You can even give them, if you want, you could have a printout, of course, where you have the columns, and they have to record name, phone number, nationality, job, etc. But you could also just have them write in their notebooks. You could have something about jobs. So maybe they are looking for, maybe half of the class is supposed to be hiring somebody and half of the class is looking for a job. And so they have to kind of meet each other, almost like mini interviews, but you're doing it as a mingle, where the people who are hiring ask different questions to see who's the best person for the job, and the ones who are looking for the jobs try and find somebody who wants to hire them by answering their questions. And again, it can be very controlled or it can be more open. With dialogues, dialogues can be very, very useful, and every course book has listening activities, and usually they'll have the script in the back of the book, or maybe in the teacher's book, but usually it's there somewhere. Sometimes within the lesson, they'll have the dialogue written out. And I used to love using these for more than just listening, because you can do so much with them, especially for students who aren't as confident with the language. You can get them, first of all, to just practice with the dialogue exactly the way it is. So in this case, they might be focusing more on pronunciation, with kind of the idea of turn taking in a conversation, with intonation, or things like that. And then you can slowly get them to adapt the dialogue. So if it was a dialogue about introducing yourself, they might start by reading it exactly as it is. You can work with them on getting their pronunciation and intonation better. You get them to practice it a few times, and then you get them to adapt it. So maybe for somebody who's really struggling, you get them to do just very simple things like changing names or changing other things like that. For people who might be a little bit more advanced in the class, you get them to expand the dialogue, and then you get them to do it some more. And the thing that's nice about that is it's useful when you have a mixed level class, because again, you can, depending on their level, you can get them to do different things with it. It's also nice because it gives you the chance to focus on pronunciation. And you can spend a whole lesson just with a very, very short dialogue. You don't need any extra resources. You don't even have to have a player, a CD player or a computer to be able to play the dialogue. You can be the one who models it for them with one of your strong students. And then you're just spending the whole class using that dialogue and getting them to practice speaking with it. So it's really easy to do. You don't have to prepare much in advance. And students will leave feeling like they've done nothing but talk the whole time. And it will be true. And usually the dialogues that we have in our course books are practical. I think usually they're real life contexts and something that students would actually be able to use in the future. I also always loved role plays, especially the ones where it's at a doctor's office and they have to pretend that they're sick, or the ones that are about shopping. And these are two scenarios where you can do them with pretty much any level, and you just adapt depending on the level. So for shopping, for example, say you have a very low level class, a very crowded classroom, you can't get them to really move around. So maybe they just do it with the person sitting in front of them or behind them, and you present them with a simple dialogue to practice with, and then they take it in turns role playing. And you can have just on the board, you can write a list of types of shops, a list of things that they need to ask about, a list of questions. So for example, you could have them practicing in a clothing shop, practicing in a grocery store, practicing at a stationery shop, different types of places. And depending on their level, you could give them the questions, you could elicit the questions from them. You could stick with very basic things like, have you got tomatoes? How much are they? Do you have blue jeans? Do you have a size? Whatever. So you could do simple yes or no questions. And again, you can give it to them, you can elicit them. I would look at the lesson or the course book, see what they've already learned and how it fits in to decide. And similarly for the doctor's office, kind of the number of questions that you get them to ask in the role play, whether or not you provide the questions or expect them to come up with the questions. All of those things just depend on the level. The next one is the planning a trip. This is one that I used to love to do as well. And this is if you're practicing, it could be that you're practicing future, or it could be that you're practicing a certain like vocabulary set. Like tourist attractions, for example, could be the vocabulary set that you're practicing. And this is where you get them in groups to kind of plan a trip. And the speaking really happens through that planning. And so you might want to give them some language to use for the actual discussion. But they enjoy dreaming and just thinking about where they would like to go. And with this, again, depending on your resources, you could give them, they could be using like their phones to search, if they're allowed phones in class. They could use their book if it's got readings about different places. You could have some things that you've printed out and brought for them. You could get them to plan a trip within the country. So maybe they don't know that much about other places. So you get them to plan a trip within your own country. or even within your own city. So again, it's very easy to adapt something like that. And then the final one, I just have as introducing. And this is where you get them to take on a new identity. And you do this kind of as a whole class. You can start with yourself as the teacher. And this is great to practice questions. So for example, if it was my turn and I wanted to kind of model this for my class, I would say, my name is Rebecca Jones. Okay. I would just start with that. I have a new name, and then I turn it over to the students, and they have to ask me questions. The question is grammatically correct, and I have to answer it. If it's not grammatically correct, then they have to try to reformulate to get me to get it correct that I answer. And again, it's a way to practice questions, and then you just answer, and it gets them, they have to be creative and come up with answers on the spot. Or you as the teacher could be the one who does the acting there. I think we're nearly out of time, I think. So I'll stop there and just come to any questions. I'll exit so that I can see the chat better, so that you can see me. Sorry, I tried to pack a lot in there in terms of activities. Does anyone have any questions about those?
Yes, now, if there is any question, please raise your hand and we will let you to ask her, please. Raise your hands. Yes, the first one is Nasra. Go ahead, please, with your question. Miss Nasra.
Hello, dear. Hello, my colleagues. Yeah.
Hello.
Can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
There are some challenges that we face in our classes concerning the speaking skills. Since we have big classes, I mean, numbers are 30, around 30, 35 at least. So there will be some listening and speaking activities. This is the first issue. And the second issue is that we have a curriculum that we have to finish. If we give that much time for the listening or speaking skill, we will never finish our curriculum as it is needed from the ministry. And we have rules, we have supervisors, we have fathers, we have headmistresses, and I don't know, where should we go? What should we do? These are the main two challenges that we as teachers face concerning the listening and speaking skills. Okay, thank you. Maybe you have some solutions, dear.
Yeah, thank you. I don't know if I have solutions, but I have some ideas or suggestions at least. I think that even with big classes, you can still do some of the activities that I described. You just have to adapt them. But I think the more important point is around curriculum. And that goes back to one of the points I made earlier about how does it fit? So how does this activity fit with everything else? And what's your reason for doing it? Because you can still do speaking. Speaking is part of the curriculum. It's in there. And speaking should never be, at least I don't think, I think it should be for more than just the sake of speaking. There should be a real reason behind it. So for example, in the last example I gave, the purpose of it really is to practice questions, the form of questions. I find no matter what level students are, they always struggle with asking questions properly. So that, for example, is the way you're practicing a grammar point. With the plans, the one about future plans, again, you'd be practicing future tenses. If you have them doing say a ladder discussion describing what they did last weekend, they would be practicing past simple. Okay, so you can you can still focus on things from the curriculum, and I think you should. I mean, your aim, your lesson aim, it's probably already there for you. You're following the curriculum, so you have certain things, and you have certain things that you have to teach them. You're required. If you don't teach them the things that you have to get through that year, and the next year they're going to be behind. If you're, and that puts pressure on you, and you have to follow it. But you can still practice speaking. Start with the aim. If it's a grammatical point, think about when you actually need to use that grammar, a scenario. And I mean, I think that the best way to see if they can use it is by doing some kind of speaking practice like this. It could be something really brief, but that kind of production at the end of the lesson can tell you a lot about whether or not they've really learned it. More so, I think, than just having them do, like some sentence completion exercises or sentence transformations in the course book.
Yeah, dear, thank you. You mean that I have to adjust to my aims, adjust the speaking skills to my aims as much as I can, which is related to the curriculum.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Stick with the curriculum and the aims in it.
Yeah. Another thing I wanted to add, and I wanted your point of view about it, which is the teacher's book a Holy Quran for us teachers? I mean, when I start my giving my class, I adjust it and I check what is suitable for my students related to that activity, then I do it. So I faced a problem over here. I changed the slide concerning the teacher's book activities, or what does it say? Students should listen first. They should fill in spaces second. Then they should write. If I change adjusting to my students' needs, am I wrong over here? Just I need your help and your feedback concerning this.
I would say number one, you always put the students' needs first. Like, absolutely, always put it first. So it doesn't matter what.
Because this was.
Yes, Miss Runa, it is the reality that we should consider our students' levels. Sorry, Miss Nasra. Sorry for interruption. I said it is preferable, and it is a reality to be careful or to care more about our student levels. But as Miss Nasra says, our supervisors, our headmistresses always stick to the curriculum, stick to the plan. They said, why are you late? Not how much do our students gain from the material, for example.
So this is exactly what I mean.
Yes,
I
understand.
faced the situation and my class. And yes. I heard that you should, Miss Nasra, you shouldn't do this. You should stick to the teacher's book. I know my students' needs. I know what do they need and how should I do it. It's not a Holy Quran. It's not a taboo if I move, use another strategy, another way to make the idea clear for my students. I don't know. Yes, I think this is the true and the right thing.
Yeah, I'll confess something. I
Ministry
never.
Education or the supervisors or the one who is doing these things. Yeah.
I mean, I'll confess something to you. I don't think that I ever used the teacher's book for any book that I ever taught with. I've always stuck with the curriculum. Okay, so if I have certain units I'm supposed to cover, I have certain language points that I have to cover, certain skills. That's fine. I always cover them. If I have to follow a certain schedule with them, I'll do that. But I've never felt that pressure to follow the teacher's book. Now, I mean, what I would suggest, because you have responsibilities towards your students, but you also have people who observe you, people who watch what you're doing. I would just speak to them. I mean, if you're achieving the aim, okay? But you're doing it in a slightly different way, but the aim from the curriculum is being achieved, then I can't imagine what the problem would be, except maybe misunderstanding. I don't know. I mean, it sounds very frustrating, but you're not wrong.
Thank you, dear. Thank you so
Miss.
much.
Thank you for your answer. Let's come to Mr. Bilal, please. Go ahead with your question. Mr. Bilal.
Yes, Assalamu alaikum. Do you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, good. First, I'd like to thank the organizer and the presenter as well. You did very well, teacher. Miss Rana. Rana, right?
Yes.
Okay. First, is there a sort of diagnostic test for the speaking methods, for example? How can I make sure that this method, for example, role play, is more efficient for my class? Or how to choose between method A and method B and so on? Is there a diagnostic test for speaking? Sorry?
No, there's not a specific test that I would use, but I would just think about the level of the students and how much time you have. Okay, so something like a role play, all right, is going to take more time than just using a dialogue and adapting a dialogue and that kind of thing. It'll need more time for the actual activity. It'll need
You
more
mentioned
time for
around
setup.
five methods of speaking, let's say activities that I may engage in my classroom. Can I be sure, for example, that this method is more efficient for my class, or method A is less difficult or more difficult than which is better to start with to initiate my speaking activity with the students?
So I would start with things that are more controlled. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So I would start, for example, with like a very controlled dialogue where you're just having them practice the conversation and see how they do with that. And then you could move into something like asking them to make small changes to it, such as maybe you have maybe you've written the dialogue on the board actually, and that's what they're using to practice. Maybe you underline a few words for them to change to make the dialogue their own. Something like that is very, very controlled.
In case I understand, got your point with the controlled dialogue. In case I face kind of challenges, or let's say depressing feedback, like the students may not care, or for example may not be like active with me, or they may not care. There are lots of gaps actually, grammar gaps, some corona and siege gaps, lots of things that affected or had impact on the educational process. We have a problem motivating the students to be like active in the classes. See, so when I engage kind of a conversation activity or speaking activity in my class, I quickly feel like down. They pull me down. They do not. They do not.
Sitting and just staring or talking in Arabic, and it's not really engaged that way. Yeah, I mean, I think one, you have to be consistent. Okay. So if you want them, for example, one of the things that we talked about is just integrating speaking throughout the lesson. So if you establish a routine at the beginning of each lesson where you start by, I don't know, asking 3 people what they did yesterday in English, and they give you like very quick 1-sentence answers, or you ask them for what are you going to do tonight, or I don't know, you have some kind of routine that involves speaking at the beginning of class. if you don't do it every day, it's gonna die down. It's not gonna work out very well. If you set a rule, if you set a rule at the very beginning that I'll answer questions that you have, but I'll only answer them if you ask me in English. If you start answering the questions they ask you in Arabic, they're just not going to believe in the rule and they're not going to even try. The same thing with speaking activities. If they don't have a reason for doing it, then they're just not going to. So you don't want to punish them in terms of their grades because they're not used to it. I feel like it wouldn't really be fair. But maybe you have some kind of reward system. I don't know, maybe you have each row in the class or maybe you have each row and you have points for them that you take,
the majority
participation
of time to touch interest points and to try to pick the topics of those I believe that my students like to talk about, even if they were not appropriate, let's say, to their level or to their age or to the tradition. Sometimes just to drag them to the point that they start, because I believe that when my students start speaking, and then it's a student encourages another and so on and so on. It's a kind of chain. And this chain of shyness, let's say, once it's broken, then everybody starts speaking. Even they may commit mistakes, it's not a problem. But the problem is here, actually, we have lots of gaps here. We have lots of challenges. It's more complicated, actually, than we think, or than we are trying to make it easier. No, but it is really complicated between the system, the curriculum, the time, the objectives, and the low-level whatever educational system in our country. So yes, we're trying to do our best, but sometimes,
I'll give you two quick ideas and just one. But before that, I want to say there's a lot that's outside of any one person's control. I mean, you're absolutely right when you say that there are a lot of issues kind of with the system at a systems level, a lot of gaps. But I try not to let it get you down, because I think it can be really easy to almost, it can be easy to give up, hard not to give up, really. And because there are so many issues and so little is in your control. But students, you can do some small things. I mean, one thing that I used to do with teenagers, you can get them to come and give updates on like the football matches. Okay. So you could have them presenting that at the start of each lesson, as long as they do it in English, right? If there's a show that they're all watching, like I don't know, some of the talent competitions like Arabs Got Talent or The Voice or something like that, and it's, you think most of your students have been watching it, you can start at the beginning of the week.
From time to time, like comparisons and so on between the classes, but back again to the limitations of our timetable. Thank you very much. My question is done, and your answer is perfect. Thanks again, Miss Rana, and also Miss or Mrs.
Sophia.
Yes.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Bilal, for your question.
Effort. Okay, bye.
Thank you. Thank you very much, and welcome to our association, and wait us for other webinars, inshallah. Now let's come to Mrs. Majida. Yes.
Good evening.
Good evening. Hi.
Okay. First of all, let me thank you for this useful session, Ms. Rana. And my thanks also go to the organizer, Ms. Shafia, and to everyone with us. And my question is, as an English teacher, what are the considerations that I should take while designing speaking activities for classes with mixed ability students? Thank you.
Yes, Miss Rana. Did you hear her? Miss Rana, we don't hear you.
Uh-oh. Can you hear me now?
Now, yes, yes,
Okay, sorry, I was having a hard time with the unmute. It seemed to unmute, but
yes.
it didn't.
Don't
So
worry.
the question is about mixed abilities, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes,
So
yes.
I would say two key things. One, thinking about the level of support that they need, okay? And managing your own expectations for what they're going to produce. Okay, so for in the example I gave about just practicing introducing themselves, for a very low level, you need to just focus on maybe 2 or 3 things, like their name, nationality, and maybe you want to do phone number just to practice numbers, for example, because saying that's a basic language point, and sometimes they have a hard time saying numbers. Okay, or maybe it's just practicing their name and their nationality. But it's still under the idea of introducing yourself. Now, if it was a more advanced group, okay, or you have more advanced students, you can add extra things, or you can ask them to. So that's how within the same lesson, the same group, you can adjust the task depending on the level of the learners. But the other thing to consider is how you pair them or group them. Okay, sometimes it can be useful to pair up somebody, a weaker student with a stronger student, but sometimes it's actually better to pair them up based on their level. So with the idea of using the dialogues, for example, it's a good idea to pair up people at a similar level. So that way they can adapt according to their level. If their level is quite low, they can keep the dialogue very simple, very short, and very similar to what's already there. But if their level is stronger, then they can make more adaptations to it and they can expand it. But every level can practice speaking. Okay, you might have to adjust your expectations around what they'll be able to produce. Maybe you have to give them something more structured to work from, depending on their level. But every level can do it.
Yes, thank you for this answer. Now let's come to Miss Huda.
Welcome
Miss Huda,
everybody. Welcome everybody.
welcome.
Good evening. I want to thank you for this presentation. It's a successful one. I don't have questions, but I want to talk about my experience with my classes at my school in 10th grade and 11th grade. It was a successful one. And with the 11th grade, I used the presentation. I asked my students to choose any subject they like, and to talk it at the beginning of the class for 5 minutes or 2 minutes or 3 minutes as they want, yani, as the topic used for them, and then they like this way. They like it, and I have 30 students in each class, and they like this activity. And in the future, I will use other activities to encourage them to speak. They like it very much, and after speaking. I ask the other students what's the benefit, what's the idea, and they talk, they speak, they became very active in this one. With 10th grade, I use the activity, the dialogue. According to their levels, each two students choose a topic, and they talk to each other for 2 minutes also, and it was a successful one. I use this at the beginning of each lesson, and it was successful. Thank you.
Thanks, Ms. Huda, for telling us about your experience, and we hope that all of us will be experienced, successful, and distinguished teachers as well. Okay, thank you. Now, if there is any other question, please, you can raise it. اللي عنده أي سؤال يتفضل يسأل. بنوه بعثت الفورم على الشات. The form for automatic certificates was sent in the chat box. Please fill it. Write your name, okay, and your email, and the certificate will arrive automatically in your email, okay? Yes. Now, if there is any other question, you can ask Ms. Runa. No question, so I am so glad to present this certificate for our distinguished presenter, Ms. Runa from the British Council. So happy to join us, Ms. Runa. It was a very fruitful presentation, very useful information for us as educators, practice and to use them inside our classes, so as to be careful about our students' levels, about their different learning styles, about their multiple intelligences, and to upgrade their levels. Thank you very much, and we are so happy to present this certificate from our association. Me as Shawqiya Hawawra, the president of Arab English Teachers Association, and my colleague from Syria, the managing editor, Miss Dania Al-Korani. So congratulations, Miss. Hope
Thank
that
you
it
so
is
much.
interesting.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you for inviting me today.
Thank you.
Shawqiya, I'd like to thank you and Miss Runa and Miss Dania. Thank you for your effort, for your great efforts to rise up the English subject and the English language strategies and the way of teaching it. Thank you so much again. Thank you, Amelia.
Thank you, my colleague, Miss Nasra. Thank you for joining us. Thanks all for the participants from all over the world, not only from the Arab world, but also from the other world. And join us for the next week with another guest from Tunisia. We will announce it soon, inshallah. And for the other weeks also, we will have other presenters from Iran, from Tunisia, from Egypt, from Palestine, and many other countries. Hope you enjoy our session today. And if there is any last question, you can raise it for our guests. Thank you.
Thank you, all of you, for providing me the opportunity to be a part of such a nice webinar.
Thank you, Mr. Zubair. Welcome from India. We are happy to join us this session.
Yeah, Miss Shokia, ma'am, invited me at this platform in the Arab world. Actually, I am a professor in university here in New Delhi, in India, and I teach those who will be teacher in future in the teacher training college to the bachelor's and the master degree students. And I am teaching education psychology and special education and inclusive education there. And surely I will also want to take some sessions if Miss Shokia will permit me in future. So it's
Yes,
very
of course.
nice to
Welcome.
it's a nice session. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you. And we welcome all distinguished teachers to participate and to present some sessions in our newly formed association, because we care for our teachers, our educators all over the world, in order to upgrade their levels professionally, in order to equip them with new strategies, in order to upgrade and stimulate our students as well. Thank you very much.
Yeah, you are well, absolutely right. Because every individual is unique and every student is important for teacher, and we have to enhance the skills, and we have to, enhance the skills of teachers, and we have to give the need-based education to every child. Yeah,
Yes,
thank you.
you are right. Thank you. Thank you. Now, there is a question with AKA. معلش لو تسموا حالكم أسماءكم الحقيقية لأن مش عارفة أنادي الاسم يا AKA. Please go ahead with your question, AKA. Where are you?
Hello,
She has.
I'm allowed to
Hello.
speak in Arabic and
Hello.
English session. Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, yes. Go ahead, Miss Khulud.
Yeah, but just wanted to ask, are we allowed to speak in Arabic and English session?
Yes.
Okay, I just wanted to thank you for this amazing and interesting session. It was really beneficial and really insightful for us. It really made us forget about today's match because it was really devastating for us. So really thank you for that. And I'm looking forward for more sessions like this. Thank you.
Yes, we promise you that we will have more sessions, more useful sessions for us as educators. We promise you another time. Thank you. Yes, the form here, it is in the chat box. You can fill it another time and you will receive your certificate automatically. Okay? I send it another time. Please write your email, your name, and you will have nice certificates. If there is any other question before we leave, you can ask.
Hello, can you hear me?
Miss شوقية الفورمام يفتح.
ليه؟
I don't have a specific question. I would like to thank you about this
ما عم يفتح ما بعرف
really
ليش ما عم يفتح.
amazing.
معلش اللي بتحكي صوتك واطي.
Okay, I'll try to raise it. Hello, can you hear me now?
Hello. Yes, of
Is
course.
it clear now?
Yes.
Okay, I don't have a specific
yes.
question for you, but just I'd like to thank all of you, especially you, Ms. Roki, and
Yes,
your
introduce
guest here.
yourself.
Yes, my name is Leila Agil, and I'm from Libya, and this is the first time for me to attend a seminar with you or a session like that. I really admire the way that she presents, although I attended lately, but I like it the way because I'm interested in this subject exactly, or in this topic that she talked about. Many thanks to you, Ms. Rokia, and to Rona as well. And all my thanks to all the guests here, all the audience, I mean, here. Thank you so much, and I would like to join more and more with you.
Thank you and welcome to our association, and keep noticing our sessions.
Okay, just I would like to ask about the forum. Where can I find it? Is it in WhatsApp or
Yes, I
here?
sent it. Oh no, I sent it here in the chat box. Okay.
I cannot find it because I cannot attend the
ما
chat
بيفتح
here.
ما بيفتح. أستاذة شوقية ما
I don't have
بيفتح.
the ability to attend the chat.
I sent it another time. There is no chat with you?
Yeah, I cannot attend the chat.
Why?
Shawqiya, it seems that she doesn't have a chat box because
Why?
she attended late.
Yes, I
Maybe
sent it
because
now.
I
I
attended.
sent it now. Miss Dania also sent it. معلش الآن شوفي في الشات بوكس.
ما عنديش قدرة اني ندخل الشات، ما فيش
She
خيار
doesn't have
ندخل
a chat
الشات.
box. Shawqiya.
اتواصلي معي إن شاء الله وراح تلقيه.
اوكي. إن
هو
شاء الله.
ما عم يفتح.
Now those
ما عم
are
يفتح
some of the
أستاذة.
certificates for whom applied and wrote their names in the certificates. Those are the certificates. They have arrived in their emails. Okay, congratulations all.
I'm sorry, but do we have to fill in the form to earn our certificates, or you can just follow your own procedures in the meanwhile?
Yes, you can fill the form, and when you fill it, at once you will receive it in your email.
Okay, so I have
Okay.
I just put a QR code up on the screen. If you can't see the chat to have the form, just use your phone to open up through the form through the QR code.
Sorry.
I was saying I have this. I opened up.
Yes, thank you, dear Runa. We received the QR code. Yes, thank you.
You're welcome.
Congratulations
So
all.
they
Thank
can
you
register by using this code.
Yes, of course. Thank you, Miss Runa, another time. Thank you all our guests from all over the world, and keep care and keep safe because we need you.
Good night, everybody. Good night.
Good night.
Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
أنا ما مفتاح
Good
معي
night.
السوية.
Good night, everyone, and thank you, Shakya ma'am,
ما
for
مفتاح
inviting
غير
me.
كذا مرة ما مفتاح.
Night. ايش يا
All
أستاذة؟
code not active Miss شوقية.
الباركود ما
ما
بيفتح؟
مفتح ما مفتح غير كذا مرة ما مفتح. لا ما
طيب
مفتح.
بعثت الفورم.
الفورم.
أنا بعثت الفورم كمان مرة.
يعني بعتيه فتحته بعتيه كذا مرة ما مفتح.